A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 37. He considered your feelings. Since Benny had asked Lucian to join them, there was no reason for Roxanne to refuse. She forced a smile and said, "You're just in time, Mr. Farwell. Please join us." With that, she walked into the kitchen to take another set of cutleries. Standing alone in the kitchen, Roxanne couldn't help but be a little distracted. Meanwhile, Benny led Lucian to take a seat at the table. However, Roxanne did not come out of the kitchen for quite some time, leaving Lucian with no cutleries. Puzzled, the boys urged, "Mommy!" The children's voices immediately pulled Roxanne back to reality. She quickly composed herself and walked out. Everyone at the table turned to look at her in unison. Lucian's eyes darkened when he saw Roxanne's expression. Roxanne placed the cutleries in front of Lucian before returning to her seat under everyone's gazes, all the while pretending to be calm. None of the adults spoke first. Even the children were suddenly at a loss for what to say. They could only exchange glances and shift their gazes between Roxanne and Lucian, hoping one of them would break the silence. Sensing the children's hopeful gazes, Lucian suppressed his displeasure and said grimly, "I've asked Aubrey to move out." Everyone was stunned by his words. Roxanne looked up at Lucian in surprise, her hand holding a fork pausing mid-air. Lucian did not express his thoughts on the matter during their last conversation about it. Roxanne had thought Aubrey would continue living in his house for some time. Yet little did she expect Lucian to be so efficient. He had already asked Aubrey to move out when he went home to disinfect the house. He must have taken my advice. The three children looked at Lucian with eyes that seemed to sparkle with delight. "Is it true, Daddy?" Estella tugged at Lucian's shirt sleeve, wanting to confirm what she had just heard. Lucian nodded, then explained to no one in particular, "It was my mom who wanted Aubrey to live in my house. I never really agreed to it in the first place, and I've been wanting to make her leave. It's just that I never had a valid reason." After that, Lucian looked up at Roxanne and said solemnly, "Essie's illness this time has given me a perfect excuse to get rid of her, so I sent her to my mom's place." After listening to Lucian's explanation, Estella finally believed that the evil woman was gone. "Hooray!" she clapped excitedly. Roxanne, on the other hand, had been staring at Lucian the entire time. She knew that his explanation earlier was meant for her ears. She pursed her lips, not knowing what to say. "Thank you, Ms. Jarvis," Estella said excitedly, turning around to face Roxanne. It was at that moment that Roxanne returned to her senses. She met Estella's eyes, feeling utterly confused. After all, she had little to do with Aubrey leaving the Farwell residence. She did not understand why Estella was thanking her. "Daddy must have taken your advice and chased the evil Miss Pearson away." Estella tilted her head and spoke on behalf of her father. Taken aback, Roxanne peered at the man in front of her. Lucian merely raised his brow without admitting or denying Estella's claims. From the boy's point of view, Lucian's silence meant he agreed with Estella's words. They were secretly pleased upon realizing that Daddy made Ms. Pearson leave sooner because he considered your feelings, said Roxanne. Lucian's behavior made Roxanne feel strangely guilty that she sounded as if she was in a daze. "I did not lie to you." Estella faked a nod, turning to the boys and flashing them a grin. Thanks to Lucian's sudden appearance, Roxanne felt less guilty toward the children. However, she felt stressed all the same. Finally, lunch was over. Roxanne had thought Lucian would bring Estella home after lunch. However, to her surprise, Estella was reluctant to leave. Roxanne had no choice but to let Estella stay and play for a while before seeing them off. That day, Estella was extremely happy. Not only did she get to play at Roxanne's house, but she also found out that Aubrey was gone. Estella was grinning from ear to ear during their journey back to the manor. Lucian, on the other hand, felt conflicted when he saw how happy Estella looked through the rear-view mirror. "Daddy, Benny says you and Ms. Jarvis were in the living room last night. Is that true?" Estella finally asked the question that had been nagging at her all day. Lucian froze at Estella's question. Whatever happened last night was done out of his impulse. Now that he thought about it, he reckoned Roxanne must have been taken aback by his actions. However, it was already too late to regret it. Truth was, Lucian had also pretended to be calm around Roxanne. Now that Estella was asking him about it, he felt an inexplicable wave of emotions forming in his heart. Without waiting for Lucian's reply, Estella pressed further sweetly, "Daddy, what were you and Ms. Jarvis talking about so late at night? Did you make her angry again?" Lucian could feel his head aching as he listened to her. He could imagine who Estella would side with if she found out about her relationship with Roxanne. "Ms. Jarvis came out to have a glass of water, and we talked about your illness," answered Lucian solemnly. As to whether he made Roxanne angry, he did not answer that question. From his point of view, he had merely gone a little overboard when he bullied Roxanne. Did she get angry? Oh, well. It's too late to worry about that now. Estella was relieved to hear Lucian's reply. However, she complained unhappily after that, "Is that all?" Lucian cocked a brow. "What else should we have talked about?" Estella said matter-of-factly, "You should have also asked her when she would become my mommy." Her reply redefined Lucian's understanding of her. When Estella had refused to speak back then, he had feared she would continue to stay quiet in the future even after she had learned how to speak. However, she had dismissed all of his worries during this period. Is it because she likes Roxanne a lot? Essie seems to talk a lot when it's a topic about Roxanne and me. Most of the time, Estella's words were as shocking as what he had heard earlier. If he had not heard it with his own ears, he wouldn't have believed it was his own daughter who had said that. Essie glanced at Lucian's back in disdain. "Daddy, do you not know how to pursue Ms. Jarvis, or were you lying to me back then?" Her questions made Lucian frown. "I didn't lie to you." "Then when will Ms. Jarvis become my mommy?" Lucian's eyes darkened, and he said, "I can only promise you I won't let any other woman apart from Ms. Jarvis become your mommy." As for when, he did not tell Estella. In truth, he had already popped the question, but in a very overwhelming method, which caused Roxanne to be extremely aversive toward him. "Am I bothering you?" Although Lucian did not answer her question directly, Estella was satisfied with his response, and she nodded obediently. Meanwhile, Roxanne was also being questioned by her two boys. "Mommy, did Mr. Farwell make you angry?" Benny had been following her wherever she went like a puppy. Having been questioned for almost half a day, Roxanne answered in resignation, "No." "Then why did you ignore Mr. Farwell during lunch earlier?" Benny asked, unwilling to give up. Roxanne and Lucian did not exchange a single word with each other during the entire meal. Neither of them had responded, even when the children had tried their best to create an opportunity for them to speak. Roxanne, especially, had seemed to ignore the words Mr. Farwell in the children's sentences. In fact, she had barely looked at him. Feelings of guilt rose in Roxanne's heart when she heard the boy's question. The reason she had ignored Lucian was that she did not want to see his face, for she would be reminded of the incident last night. She felt incredibly troubled whenever she thought about it. "I'm just a little tired because I didn't sleep well last night. That's why." Roxanne made an excuse after some time. She then turned around and headed upstairs. "I'm going upstairs to get some rest. Play among yourselves, okay?" Archie and Benny watched her leave, their eyes filled with suspicion. They could tell she was lying, but it was true that she did not sleep well last night, so they stopped questioning her. As soon as she returned to her room, Roxanne felt a wave of relief washing over her thanks to the silence. For some unknown reason, the boys seemed to be very interested in her relationship with Lucian recently. If it were not for the boys' normal behavior, she would have wondered if they had found out about their identities. As she was lost in her thoughts, her phone rang. She snapped back to her senses and lowered her head to check who the caller was. "It's Jack. He must be calling because of the project." Roxanne answered her phone without hesitation. "Am I bothering you?" Jack's voice sounded the moment the call connected. Roxanne recollected herself and smiled. "No. I'm resting in my room. Is there any problem with the project?" Hearing her response, Jack raised his brow and asked unhappily, "Am I only allowed to contact you because of the project?" His tone of voice clearly expressed his emotion, leaving Roxanne momentarily at a loss for words. Right then, Jack's voice rang out again in his usual calm tone as if what Roxanne had heard earlier was just her imagination. "Anyway, you guessed it right. For our project, we need to collaborate with a pharmaceutical company. Recently, I've looked into the companies in Horrington, and I think Herbscape Group is quite good. It took me quite some time to convince them to sign the agreement. They'll be providing our follow-up medication." The mention of the project dismissed the strange feeling she had felt earlier. She smiled and said, "That's great. Herbscape Group is one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in Horrington. We won't have to worry about our medicinal herbs supply in the future. Thank you for the hard work, Mr. Damaris. You've solved a huge problem on our behalf." Roxanne's research institute had been facing problems in terms of their medicinal herbs supply, all because of Aubrey and Sonia, who had been making things difficult for her. Roxanne was sincerely delighted to hear that Jack had solved the problem. "See? Will you be free?" Jack smiled guardedly. But Herbscape Group made a condition when they signed the contract. "What's the condition?" Roxanne had a feeling that it had something to do with her. Otherwise, Jack would not have called her on purpose. "Their boss wants you to attend the contract signing ceremony, which will also be considered a promotion for their company. He did not know Heartbreak Group's objective for making Roxanne their gimmick until someone had reminded him of the news about her that had spread all over the internet not long ago. Although the news had died almost instantly, it was undeniable that it had caused her to be well known among the younger generation in Horrington. No one knew if her beauty or her medical attainments were the reason for her fame. With Heartbreak Group suddenly announcing that they were working with Damaris Group and releasing news about Roxanne attending the contract signing ceremony, they would no doubt attract more attention, which would, in turn, cause their status in Horrington to rise with the tide. Jack found it rather amusing when he realized that. It seemed as though he, the eldest son of the Damaris family, was not as great as Roxanne in the eyes of Heartbreak Group. Roxanne was momentarily stunned. After several seconds, she smiled and said, "If my attendance contributes to Heartbreak Group's decision to sign the agreement, I'll gladly comply." Jack fell silent for a while before saying apologetically, "I'm sorry for what happened back then. It's all because of me. In the end, I didn't do anything to help. I'm truly sorry." Roxanne was suddenly at a loss, uncertain of what he was referring to. It was Mr. Farwell who took action against the Hightower family, wasn't it? Jack guessed. When the Hightower family got into trouble, Stephen had gone looking for Hector in hopes of getting the latter's help to talk to Lucian. It was only then that Hector had found out what had happened. Hector had always admired Roxanne. When he found out from Stephen that Jessica had pestered Roxanne after getting drunk and even caused the latter so much trouble, he had stormed off on the spot. Stephen had been unbelievably livid at that moment. Finally, Roxanne came back to her senses. Jack's talking about the previous uproar on the internet. It makes sense now that I think about it. The Hightower family is close to the Damaris family. It's only normal for Jack to know what happened to them. She had no choice but to admit, "Mr. Farwell did help me." Jack smiled understandingly. "Looks like Mr. Farwell treats you differently." His words planted a strange feeling in her heart. She held her breath, worried he might say something else. Thankfully, Jack was a person who knew where to draw the line. When he heard no response from her after his comment, he stopped questioning and returned to the previous topic. "My grandpa wants me to apologize on his behalf." His words threw her for a loop again. "You mean old Mr. Damaris? What does that have to do with him?" Jack explained, "We fell for Jessica's plan because Grandpa didn't know about the situation and promised Stephen to help her. Grandpa has been regretting it ever since that incident." Moved by his explanation, Roxanne smiled and said, "It's okay. That matter is already in the past. Besides, Jessica was the one at fault. It has nothing to do with other people. Anyway, she has already gotten her punishment, and that's all that's needed." After that, Roxanne changed the topic nonchalantly. "By the way, when is the contract signing ceremony with Heartbreak Group?" "Tomorrow night. Will you be free then?" Roxanne agreed. "There is still a possibility." After ending the call and noticing that it was about time, Roxanne headed downstairs to prepare dinner for the children. Archie and Benny were sitting on the carpet, playing with Lego. When they saw their mother, they exchanged a brief glance, but they did not continue bombarding her with questions. "I have work to do tomorrow night. Aunt Madeline will be keeping you company, okay? Roxanne told Archie and Benny about the arrangements for the tomorrow night over dinner. Upon hearing that, they looked at her in puzzlement. Why do you have to leave at night? Is it a business-related social event? Roxanne had never hidden anything about work from Archie and Benny. She said patiently, there are new developments for the project that I'm working on with Mr. Damaris. I need to attend a contract signing ceremony tomorrow. Archie and Benny looked at each other as the same question surfaced in their minds. Will Mr. Damaris be there too? We still remember Mr. Damaris. He's Daddy's love rival. Roxanne nodded noncommittally. Mr. Damaris will be with me. Immediately after she said that, she noticed a strange expression on the children's faces. What's wrong? She asked in confusion. Archie and Benny shook their heads quickly before looking at her and asking a question that gave her a huge headache. Mommy, will you let Mr. Damaris be our daddy? Since we don't know if Daddy has asked that question before, we'll find out on his behalf. Looking at Archie's and Benny's earnest expressions, Roxanne could not help but think about Lucian's face. Although the children had asked a question that was completely different from his, they were fundamentally asking the same thing. When the children mentioned Lucian, there was a strangely wary look on their faces. Roxanne suspected that the boys had already found out about their identities. She asked tentatively, do you want Mr. Damaris to be your daddy? Archie and Benny were dumbfounded. Since Mommy didn't deny it outright, it means that there's still a possibility. If that's the case, Daddy's in danger. However, to prevent Roxanne from suspecting that they knew about their identities, Archie and Benny deliberately revealed an innocent smile. We'll listen to you, Mommy. You'll definitely find a great daddy for us. Roxanne stared at Archie and Benny for a while but could not detect anything strange about them. Still having her doubts, she nodded and forgot to explain about her relationship with Jack to them. While the children mulled over Roxanne's replies over the meal, they could not help but feel worried for their father. Roxanne found it strange when she noticed how unenthusiastic they were. However, she could not put a finger on it. Mommy, we're full. We'll head upstairs first. After shoving some food into their mouths, they jumped down from their chairs. Roxanne felt even more puzzled. Archie and Benny don't usually eat so little. What's wrong with them today? Realizing that they had acted overly nervous, they quickly came up with an excuse. We didn't sleep well last night. We're tired. Archie and Benny looked dazed as they spoke. Recalling the fiasco from the night before, Roxanne nodded in agreement without giving it much thought. However, looking at how briskly they climbed the stairs, Roxanne thought they did not seem exhausted at all. His in her 791. A secret to tell you. Archie and Benny dashed to their room after they headed upstairs. Archie, Mommy's meeting Mr. Damaris tomorrow. Should we tell Daddy about it? Asked Benny with slight hesitation. Upon deliberation, Archie said, we have to tell him. They had kept it a secret earlier because they wanted Lucian to feel stressed about Roxanne's relationship with Jack. However, Roxanne's attitude earlier made them feel terrified. What if Mommy really chose Mr. Damaris? At that thought, the children no longer dared to hide it from Lucian. Benny asked gloomily, but how should we tell Daddy about it? They could not contact Lucian as they did not have a phone. Roxanne would be leaving tomorrow night and they did not know if Lucian would visit that day. Archie and Benny looked troubled as they thought hard about this tough question. After a while, Archie whispered something next to Benny's ear with a frown, and the latter responded with a firm nod. Then they washed up quickly and lay on the bed although it was still early. Before going to bed, Roxanne checked on the children and saw that they were sleeping soundly. Looks like they really did not have a good rest last night. Her suspicions gradually faded. Little did she know that Archie and Benny were merely pretending to sleep. With their eyes still closed, they listened to the movements outside the door quietly. Only when they could barely hear Roxanne's footstep did they sneak out of bed. While listening intently for any sounds outside, they stared at the clock. They waited until it was just before midnight when Roxanne would have probably fallen asleep before tiptoeing out of their room and down the stairs. After walking to the corded landline telephone, they cast a careful glance at Roxanne's room. When they saw that the lights in her room were turned off, they put their guard down and dialed Lucian's number. Although they did not have phones of their own, they had already memorized Lucian's number, thanks to their exceptional memory. Before dialing the number, Archie and Benny had been worried that Lucian would not pick up the call as it was so late. But to their surprise, Lucian answered the call mere seconds after they called him. What happened? Lucian was working in the study when he suddenly saw Roxanne's call. The thought that she might be in trouble made his heart sink. Unexpectedly, Archie's and Benny's mysterious voices sounded from the other end of the line. "Mr. Farwell, we have a secret to tell you." Lucian frowned. "What secret?" The children said straightforwardly, "Mommy says she's attending a contract signing ceremony with Mr. Damaris tomorrow night." A grim look spread across Lucian's face when he heard that. Even though Roxanne had explained to him numerous times what her relationship with Jack was, he was still bothered about it. Besides, something bad was bound to happen every time she went out with him. First, she was pestered by Jessica. Then, she became the center of public opinion. "Did you hear what we said, Mr. Farwell?" Archie and Benny asked when Lucian did not respond. Lucian was jolted back to his senses. Knowing that the children must be secretly sharing this intel with him, he replied solemnly, "Got it. Thank you." The children did not dare to say anything else and quickly ended the call. Benny erased the call history before they snuck back to their room. Why did Lucian suddenly come over? The following night, after getting ready, Roxanne headed downstairs and prepared to leave to meet Jack. The moment she descended the stairs, however, Archie and Benny stopped her. "Mommy, isn't Mr. Damaris picking you up?" Despite waiting for a long while, they saw no signs of Lucian. They had no choice but to think of ways to stall for time. Roxanne was confused when she heard their question. "Mr. Damaris wants to meet our collaborators early, so I'm going there by myself." "What's wrong?" Unable to think of a response on the spot, Archie and Benny exchanged a look, then flashed a grin and shamelessly blocked Roxanne's path. "What's up with you two?" Roxanne bent down and stared into their eyes. Archie and Benny fell silent again. "But Mommy, Aunt Madeline hasn't arrived yet," Archie said in piping voice. Roxanne glanced at the time. Madeline should have left work by now. Although they had agreed in the morning that Madeline would come right after work, she was still nowhere to be seen. Since it was already night time, Roxanne was in fact worried about leaving Archie and Benny alone. "Let me give her a call." Roxanne took out her phone and called Madeline, who answered the call immediately. Before Roxanne could utter a single word, Madeline's voice rang out. "Give me 10 more minutes. I was stuck in a traffic jam." "Ugh." Just when Roxanne was about to respond, Madeline mumbled, "The car in front looks so familiar." Roxanne could not help but feel worried when she heard that. "What's wrong? Is it someone we know?" The more Madeline stared at the car ahead, the more familiar it seemed. "Looks like it's heading toward our residential area. He's probably a resident here." Even after staring at the car for a long while, she still could not figure out who the owner was. Roxanne did not think too much about it as she said, "Be careful on the road. I'll leave once you arrive." "Okay," Madeline said before hanging up. Upon reaching the entrance of the residential area, Madeline watched as the car drove in and headed in the same direction as her. "Where have I seen this car before?" Madeline's expression froze when she saw that Bentley stop in front of Roxanne's house. "I remember now. It's Lucian's car. Didn't Roxanne say that she's going to a business-related social event? Why did Lucian suddenly come over? Are they going together?" Madeline was filled with confusion. When Lucian knocked on the door, she hesitated, not knowing if she should get out of the car. After all, she knew very well that Lucian was pursuing Roxanne. If she walked over, she would become the third wheel. Meanwhile, when Roxanne heard the doorbell, she assumed that Madeline had arrived. She stood up and opened the door. "You're here." Before she could finish her sentence, she looked up and met Lucian's eyes. Silence filled the air. With her fingers digging into her palms, Roxanne pretended to be calm and asked, "What are you doing here?" She looked behind Lucian and saw that Estella wasn't there. Roxanne's heart skipped a beat. "Is Essie feeling unwell?" Lucian would always bring Estella along every time he met her. Since she was not there, Roxanne assumed that she probably had an allergic reaction. However, Lucian did not respond to her question for a long time. After sensing something was off, Roxanne pressed her lips together and did not utter another word. Madeline watched as the atmosphere between Roxanne and Lucian turned tense. She decided against stepping out, instead choosing to wait quietly in the car. Nonetheless, she couldn't help letting her thoughts wander. Lucian's actions are making me second-guess myself. If Roxanne hadn't told me he wanted to win her back, I simply wouldn't have believed he was a man who would attempt such a thing. Besides, the way he's acting doesn't look like he's trying to get in a woman's good graces at all. It's more like he's trying to reclaim his territory." The more Madeline observed the former husband and wife, the more she leaned toward the theory that Lucian was merely trying to reclaim lost territory. "You're going out?" Lucian repressed his anger and cast a cold glance at Roxanne. The man was clearly feigning ignorance, for he already knew the answer to his question. Roxanne felt somewhat guilty upon meeting the man's eyes. However, when she thought about the fact that she only met up with Jack because of work, her confidence began to rise, and she responded calmly, "There's a contract signing ceremony I need to attend in a little while. I'm afraid I don't have time to attend to you, Mr. Farwell." I hope you understand. A slight crease appeared between Lucian's eyebrows as he continued to probe, is it with Jack? The question startled Roxanne. How did you know? I only received the notice last night. Moreover, Lucian has nothing to do with the project, so how did he know about this? The kids, who were in the living room, overheard their mother's question, and guilt was written all over their little faces. Subsequently, they quietly turned around and began playing with their Legos. Roxanne did not suspect her children at all. Instead, she wondered if the man in front of her was investigating her again. Lucian appeared to have seen through her thoughts, and his gaze darkened. I have my ways. His words only increased Roxanne's suspicion. When she looked at him again, there was a hint of wariness in her eyes. I don't care how you found out, but I'm heading out soon. I'd appreciate it if you would leave as well. What if I refuse? The reason I'm here today is to stop you from attending the contract signing ceremony. The man's expression turned sullen, and his tone was ice cold. To be precise, Lucian was trying to stop Roxanne from meeting up with Jack. However, Roxanne only felt that the man was being unreasonable. Are you done, Lucian? I'm only doing my job. What's the matter with you? A smile crept across Lucian's face when he heard her feisty response. The so-called job you're talking about, Ms. Jarvis, is it poaching from me? He asked. Roxanne's brows creased slightly, for she couldn't understand what the man was talking about. According to my understanding, the contract signing ceremony is between Damaris Group and Heartbreak Group. What does Lucian have to do with this? At first, Heartbreak Group intended to sign with Farewell Group. Damaris Group must have pulled a few tricks to make Heartbreak Group back out at the last minute and ultimately refuse to sign with us. Damaris Group's methods greatly displeased me, so I'm not about to let their contract signing ceremony proceed without a hitch, Lucian explained with a straight face as if these were his true thoughts. For a few seconds, Roxanne stared at him suspiciously. She thought the man was merely making up an excuse. However, she did not notice anything odd in his expression at all, which meant that he was indeed telling the truth. A strange feeling welled up within Roxanne when realization dawned upon her. All this while, Lucian's dissatisfaction toward Jack stemmed from their business squabbles. It wasn't because of me at all. Roxanne had been feeling troubled. She thought Lucian's misunderstanding of her relationship with Jack would cause trouble for the latter. As it turned out, it was she who had completely misunderstood the entire situation. What you are doing is pointless. A flash of self-mockery flitted across Roxanne's eyes. She was worried that Lucian might find trouble with Jack because of her, but it turned out that she had gotten it all wrong. All the while, Lucian was finding trouble with her because of Jack. Seeing the change in the woman's expression, Lucian realized that what he had just said might have been too suggestive. With his brows knitted together, Lucian was prepared to explain himself, but Roxanne beat him to the punch. Since it's business-related, you can reason with Mr. Damaris himself. I'm merely a researcher in this project. Both my words and my presence don't carry much weight, so even if I'm not there at the ceremony, it can still proceed without a hitch. Roxanne looked at the man in front of her with a tinge of mockery in her gaze as she continued, I'm just an insignificant member of the project. If don't attend the ceremony today, my colleagues will assume I'm unsociable and bring me trouble in the future. Mr. Farwell, please don't put me in a tight spot." The crease between Lucian's brows deepened when he heard the woman's words. She had indeed misunderstood him. "That's not what I meant," he declared. However, his reply only made Roxanne scoff. "Then what do you mean, Mr. Farwell? Are you treating me as a punching bag because you lost a business deal?" Angered, Lucian narrowed his eyes. He could not think of a way to explain himself as he was caught up in the heat of the moment. Hence, he reached out to grab the woman's wrist, not wanting to let her slip away. Without the slightest hesitation, Roxanne attempted to break free of Lucian's grip, but he was far stronger than her. "Lucian Farwell, what you're doing is pointless." Having grown frustrated after struggling for a while, Roxanne glared at the man in front of her. Lucian opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say to appease her anger. In the end, his retort was short and curt. "You can't go." For a moment, the atmosphere between the two was thick with tension. Madeline had parked her car in her own courtyard and was observing her best friend and Lucian from afar. She felt her heart tighten when the former husband and wife looked like they were arguing. Madeline did not want to become the third wheel, but in a situation like this, she was afraid that her best friend would end up being bullied. At that thought, Madeline hurriedly got out of her car and rushed over to them. When she arrived at Roxanne's doorstep, Madeline felt rather awkward, but she steeled herself and pretended as if she hadn't been observing them for a while. "Roxanne, what happened?" Lucian furrowed his eyebrows and loosened his grip around Roxanne's wrist when he noticed someone was approaching them. This allowed Roxanne to successfully break free. She walked past the man and said to Madeline, "You came just in time. Now that you're here, it's time for me to go. I'll leave Archie and Benny in your care." Once she finished speaking, Roxanne did not spare Lucian another glance. She strode toward her car and drove off to meet Jack at the venue they agreed on. Madeline watched as Roxanne drove away. Then, she shifted her gaze toward Lucian, who was still standing in front of Roxanne's house, and her face instantly fell. "I came over to rescue Roxanne, but who would have thought that she'd leave just like that? She even left me a huge mess to clean up." Trying her best to appear calm, Madeline cleared her throat and asked, "Mr. Farwell, what are?" She was interrupted mid-sentence when the man suddenly turned around. Madeline instantly shut her mouth when she noticed the gloomy expression on Lucian's face. Lucian, on the other hand, seemed to not notice Madeline as he strode past her and left in his car. It wasn't until his car had slowly gotten out of her sight that Madeline was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. What happened between them? Roxanne's car was nowhere in sight by the time Lucian drove out of her house. With a frown on his face, Lucian pulled over by the side of the road and gave Caden a call. Caden was about to give Lucian a call as well, so he quickly answered the phone when it rang. "Hello, Mr. Farwell. Find out where Herbscape Group will be signing the contract with Damaris Group," Lucian ordered coldly. "I can't believe I let her get away. I will not allow her to spend time alone with Jack without my supervision." Caden replied, "Mr. Elias wants to have a meal with you at the Twin Petal Hotel. He tried calling you, but you weren't answering your phone." So, the look in Lucian's eyes turned gloomy when he heard that. "I think I know why Dad wants to see me. He probably wants to talk me into marrying Aubrey. I just sent her over to their place yesterday, and now Mom sends Dad here to lecture me. That woman sure knows how to gain their favor. Tell him I already have plans for tonight, Lucian replied after giving it some thought. Got it. Caden hung up the phone and began looking up where Heartbreak Group and Damaris Group would be signing the contract. He gasped in surprise when he found out about the location and called Lucian back as soon as possible. Heartbreak Group and Damaris Group will be signing the contract at Twin Petal Hotel tonight. Would you still like to cancel your appointment with Mr. Elias? Lucian frowned after hearing that. No, I'll head over and see how things go. All right. Lucian then hung up the phone and drove straight to Twin Petal Hotel. Meanwhile, Roxanne's car slowly came to a halt outside the hotel. Jack and Larry were chatting with each other while waiting for her at the entrance. Roxanne took a moment to regain her composure before getting out of the car and walking up to them. Sorry to have kept you guys waiting. It's fine. The guys from Heartbreak Group aren't here yet, Jack replied with a casual smile. The three of them chatted away as they rode the elevator and headed over to the private room to wait for Heartbreak Group's representatives. After about 10 minutes, the hotel staff entered the private room with three gentlemen dressed in suits. Hello, Mr. Damaris, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Jarvis, said one of them respectfully as they all took turns shaking hands. As they had already discussed the terms of the contract beforehand, the entire process went by rather smoothly. After going through the contract one final time to make sure everything was correct, Jack, Roxanne, and Larry signed their names on it. Roxanne spaced out a little when she saw Jack chatting with the representatives from Heartbreak Group. It reminded her of what Lucian said before. Heartbreak Group was originally going to sign a contract with Farwell Group but cancelled it at the last minute and went with Damaris Group instead. I wonder what happened between them. She was snapped out of her train of thought when the representatives from Heartbreak Group got up and left. Is there anything else you two would like to discuss? If not, I'll be heading back now. Archie and Benny are still waiting for me at home, Roxanne mumbled absent-mindedly as she stood up. She was about to leave when Jack stopped her and said, "We still have a celebratory party to attend. Everyone knows you're the main reason we could sign this contract successfully, so they're all waiting to raise their glasses to you. What will I tell them if you just up and leave like this?" Roxanne froze when she heard that and recalled what Jack told her before. He said one of the terms of the contract with Heartbreak Group required me to attend their events. I didn't take it seriously at the time, but it looks like Jack wasn't kidding. Fulfill his promise to marry Aubrey. Roxanne felt conflicted as she realized she had inadvertently betrayed Lucian. I wonder what Lucian will say when he finds out. Come on, Roxanne. We're going to be working closely together from now on, so it'd do us good to spend more time with each other, Larry chimed in as well. Left with no other choice, Roxanne recomposed herself and assented with a smile. Three of them left the private room and went straight to the banquet hall on the third floor. Oksana was shocked when she stepped out of the elevator. Everyone involved in the project was already waiting for her in the banquet hall. It was as though they already knew the signing of the contract would be successful. They all flocked over to Roxanne with their glasses raised. Damaris says you played a huge part in resolving the issue with our supply of medicinal herbs, Dr. Jarvis. Here's a toast to you. It's truly amazing how a young woman like you could make such great accomplishments in the medical field." Just like that, they surrounded Roxanne and kept raising toasts to her. Since most of them were her seniors, Roxanne couldn't bring herself to refuse their toasts. Jack and Larry helped receive some of the toasts on her behalf, but they didn't dare do much in the face of those seniors. It wasn't long before Roxanne started feeling a buzz from all that drinking. Meanwhile, Lucian's car had just arrived outside the hotel. "According to what Caden told me, Damaris Group and Herbscape Group should be signing the contract on the second floor." With that in mind, Lucian quickly made his way up to the second floor, but Jack and Roxanne were nowhere in sight. It wasn't until he asked the hotel staff that he found out they had finished signing the contract long ago. The look on Lucian's face turned gloomy when he heard that. Did Roxanne go straight home after signing the contract, or is she still with Jack? He was about to give her a call when his phone started ringing all of a sudden. With a reluctant frown on his face, Lucian answered the call. "Caden should have told you that I wanted to see you, so why haven't you shown up yet?" Elias asked in a cold voice. "I just arrived at the hotel. I'll be with you in a minute," Lucian replied before hanging up the phone and entering the elevator. He had only intended to come to see Roxanne and clear things up with Elias. However, Roxanne was nowhere in sight, and Elias had already arrived. Given the circumstances, Lucian had no choice but to go and see his father. The elevator soon came to a halt on the top floor where Starlight Restaurant was located. Lucian saw his father sitting by a window the moment he stepped out of the elevator. The father and son duo both had expressionless looks on their faces whenever they weren't speaking, which made it hard for others to tell what they were feeling. Lucian walked up to the table and sat down in front of his father. Elias looked up at him and said calmly, "Ah, you're here. Go ahead and order something." "No, I still have things to take care of." Lucian turned him down without any hesitation whatsoever. Elias simply arched an eyebrow at him in response. "I know why you wanted to see me. You're here to persuade me to fulfill my promise to marry Aubrey, right?" Lucian continued. Elias nodded and got straight to the point by asking, "What do you have to say about that?" Although Elias couldn't care less about the marriage, he had to talk to Lucian because his wife had ordered him to. "7 Awfully intimate. I believe the profits I have provided the Pearson family with over the years is enough to repay old Mr. Pearson's kindness toward me. I'm also willing to help the Pearson family out if the need ever arises, so marrying Aubrey is completely unnecessary," Lucian replied. He then stared solemnly at Elias as he waited for his father to lecture him the way his mother did. To his surprise, Elias simply nodded after a brief pause and said calmly, "Do what you believe is right. I can't do much about your mother, though. That's something you'll have to deal with on your own." Lucian was so surprised that he froze for a few seconds after hearing that. "Thanks, Dad." Elias nodded. "You said you still have some business to take care of, so I won't keep you any longer. Go and do what you have to do." The two of them were always quick and efficient in the way they handled things. Lucian got up and left without saying another word. After entering the elevator, he grabbed his phone and thought about giving Roxanne a call. "Our conversation earlier didn't exactly end very well. I wonder if she'll answer my call." Meanwhile, on the third floor of the banquet hall, Roxanne was so intoxicated that she could barely stand on her feet. As if that wasn't bad enough, the splitting headache she had only made things worse. Dr. Jarvis. Having noticed her discomfort, Jack quickly stopped the people from giving her any more toasts. He then held her steady and brought her over to a corner in the banquet hall. Roxanne glanced at him in confusion when she heard him calling out to her. "You had one too many, didn't you?" "I'll send you home right away," Jack said apologetically. He had only intended to let her meet the people involved in the project. He knew there would be some drinking involved, but he wasn't expecting her to get this drunk. Roxanne was so out of it that it took a few seconds for her to register what he said. "Yeah, I did. My head hurts," she mumbled while massaging her forehead. Jack frowned worriedly. "Come on, I'll send you home." He then informed the others that they were leaving and helped Roxanne out of the banquet hall. Larry narrowed his eyes when he saw the two of them leave, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Roxanne's phone started ringing shortly after they left the banquet hall. At that point, she was so hammered that she could barely even walk. Had Jack not been there to hold her steady, she wouldn't even be able to reach the elevator. Roxanne rummaged through her handbag when she heard her phone ringing, but she couldn't seem to find it. The ringing stopped right as the elevator reached their floor. There was only one guy standing inside the elevator at the time. Jack then helped Roxanne into the elevator and pushed the button for the first floor. It wasn't until he looked up and met Lucian's icy cold gaze that he realized it was him in the elevator. "Hello, Mr. Farwell." Jack greeted him nonchalantly after the two locked eyes for a few seconds. He then shifted his gaze toward Roxanne, who was still in his arms. The look in Lucian's eyes turned increasingly gloomy. "I thought Roxanne might have gone home, so I was going to call her landline. Next thing I know, I'm greeted with this. Not only is Roxanne incredibly drunk while she's with Jack, but they're also in an awfully intimate position. Dr. Jarvis had a little too much to drink, so I'm sending her home," Jack said in an attempt to add fuel to the fire. Those words had barely left his mouth when Lucian made his way toward him. Jack simply arched an eyebrow at him as he stood his ground. "Only when she is tired." Without saying anything, Lucian reached out to grab Roxanne's hand and pulled her into his embrace. Jack knew his boundaries. Although he was holding on to her, he didn't use a lot of force, so Lucian was able to snatch her from him with ease. "What are you doing, Mr. Farwell? Dr. Jarvis gave me permission to send her home. How will I explain myself if she finds out I handed her over to you?" Jack asked with a frown. The elevator came to a halt on the first floor. "Roxanne is my ex-wife. Given our relationship, I don't think I need your permission to send her home. You will stay away from my ex-wife in the future if you know what's good for you, Mr. Damaris," Lucian said menacingly without looking back as he helped Roxanne out of the elevator. Jack, who was still standing inside the elevator, had a nonchalant look on his face when he heard that. "Really? In that case, I suppose I'll have to leave her in your care, Mr. Ex-husband," he said in the most sarcastic way possible. Lucian paused in his tracks and shot Jack a cold glare. "You are in no position to comment on our relationship." He then continued helping Roxanne out of there while Jack watched with a conflicted frown. Ever since Jack found out about their relationship, He had been wondering why the two of them got divorced back then. He also had no idea why Roxanne went overseas for 6 years after the divorce. He used to think that it was because of Lucian, but the way Lucian treated Roxanne got him questioning his own judgment. A chilly breeze was blowing outside the hotel entrance. Despite being out cold, Roxanne shuddered when she felt the wind on her body and instinctively nuzzled against his embrace. Lucian frowned slightly when he felt her do that. Keeping his anger suppressed, he took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Roxanne let out a soft groan when she felt the comforting warmth. She then buried her face in his chest and wrapped her arms around his neck. Under normal circumstances, Roxanne would have been disgusted by even the slightest physical contact with Lucian. This time, however, she was sleeping soundly in his arms. Lucian felt his heart race as it was extremely rare for her to behave like this. He quickly carried her over to his car and had a hotel staff open the door for him. Lucian gently placed her in the passenger seat and helped her put the seat belt on before driving to her house. The entire car reeked of alcohol, but Lucian kept the windows shut as he didn't want her to catch a cold. The car was really quiet since it was just the two of them inside, so Lucian could clearly hear her soft, steady breathing. Roxanne occasionally mumbled in her sleep as a result of her intoxication. Lucian felt his anger subside significantly when he saw that. Roxanne has changed a lot ever since she returned to the country. The only time she's so quiet around me is when she's tired. With a wry smile on his face, Lucian slowly increased the pressure on the gas pedal. Stay and look after mommy. Meanwhile, Madeline was keeping Archie and Benny company at Roxanne's house while waiting for her to come home. The two kids would usually pester her to play games with them, but that wasn't the case that night. For some reason, they both seemed distracted and barely paid attention to what she was saying. Madeline pretended to get mad at them and asked, "What's the matter with you two? Do you not like me anymore?" Archie and Benny shook their heads. "We do, Aunt Madeline." "Then tell me what's wrong. Why do you two look like you're in a bad mood?" Madeline pressed on patiently. We're just worried about mommy. We don't want her to end up drinking too much." "Don't mind us, Aunt Madeline," they replied while exchanging nervous glances with each other. In reality, they were wondering if Lucian managed to catch up to Roxanne or if he allowed her to be with Jack instead. They were especially concerned since Lucian and Roxanne had gotten into a fight before leaving the house. Madeline could tell that the kids didn't feel like talking, so she decided to stop asking any further and sat down beside them. "I thought I finally understood Roxanne's relationship with Lucian, but that argument they had earlier left me all confused." The three of them were waiting on the couch when a car pulled up outside the mansion. Madeline was the first to snap out of her daze and glanced at the clock. "It's 10:30. Who could be coming over at this hour? Is mommy home?" Archie and Benny asked in unison. "Roxanne should be able to open the door on her own if she's home." With a confused frown on her face, Madeline got up and made her way over to the intercom. The first thing she saw was Lucian standing outside the door with Roxanne lying weakly in his arms. Madeline blushed a little when she saw how intimate the two of them were. She then quickly turned around and told the kids, "Ahem. I think you two should head on upstairs." Naturally, they refused to do that and simply stood there staring at the door. As Lucian continued ringing the doorbell, Madeline had no choice but to open the door and make way for him. Whoa, she reeks of alcohol. Why did she drink so much? Madeline exclaimed when she noticed the strong smell of alcohol coming from Roxanne. Archie and Benny came running over and tugged at the hem of Roxanne's shirt. Mommy! Roxanne was still in a daze after being woken up by her kids. All she did was shoot them a brief glance before closing her eyes again. It wasn't the first time they had seen Roxanne come home drunk, so they had already gotten used to it. Usually, they would fetch her some water and medication to help her sober up. However, the two had a different idea when they saw Lucian carrying her in his arms. They then tugged at his sleeve and said, "Mommy looks really drunk, Mr. Farwell. Could you stay and look after her?" Madeline was a little upset when she heard that. She had no doubt that Lucian would take good care of Roxanne, but she couldn't stand the kids asking him for help while she, Roxanne's best friend, was still there. Madeline was about to offer to stay and look after Roxanne, but the kids were faster. They turned around and looked her in the eye as they continued, "Aunt Madeline needs to go to work early tomorrow, so she can't stay up late." Madeline fell speechless when she heard that. "What? I have to go to work early tomorrow?" It wasn't until she noticed Archie and Benny winking at her that she understood what they were playing at. "As much as I would love to stay and look after Roxanne, the workload at the hospital has been pretty crazy lately. Would you be able to look after her for me, Mr. Farwell? If not, I'll have no choice but to take a day off tomorrow," she said with a sigh. Feeling satisfied that Madeline was playing along, the kids shifted their gaze back to Lucian and waited for his reply. Since he had intended to stay and look after Roxanne all along, he simply met their expectant gazes and nodded in response. "This is a little strange, though. I remember Archie and Benny being mad at me for a really long time when I casually mentioned their biological father. I thought they'd hate me very much, and yet, they've been helping me win Roxanne back lately. In fact, they're putting in as much effort as Estella. With my daughter, things are a lot simpler. All she wants is for Roxanne to be her mother. With Archie and Benny, on the other hand, I have no idea why they're doing this. People might think they like me very much and want me to be their father, but I have a feeling it's more than that. I think it's because they care about Estella and want to become her family. As a result, they'd rather have me be their father than put up with some random stranger." Madeline was about to leave but got a little worried when she saw Lucian just standing there with Roxanne in his arms. "You should help her to her room," she reminded him. "Honestly, I'm starting to question if leaving her with him is the right thing to do." Hearing her voice snapped Lucian out of his train of thought. He then nodded at her and carried Roxanne up the stairs. Adeline, Archie, and Benny quickly followed behind out of concern. After watching Lucian lay Roxanne down on the bed, Madeline reminded him to take good care of her before leaving the house. As she was walking out the door, Madeline couldn't help but wonder if Roxanne knew her kids were secretly helping Lucian. Could it be that the boys have found out about Lucian being their father? If that's the case, I wonder how Roxanne would feel when she finds out they've been helping him. Archie and Benny had no idea Madeline had figured all of that out. With the most innocent looks on their faces, they stood there in Roxanne's bedroom and watched Lucian look after her. After tucking Roxanne in, Lucian bent over to feed her some water before getting back up. He paused in surprise when he turned around and saw the kids staring at him. Archie and Benny, too, froze when their gazes met all of a sudden. A few seconds later, they were able to regain their composure and smile at Lucian as if nothing happened. Lucian frowned. You two, Archie and Benny tensed up but tried their best to maintain their innocent expressions as they asked, "What's wrong?" Covered in vomit with a frown on his face, Lucian made his way over and knelt in front of them. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you two. Why are you two helping me?" he asked after a brief moment of hesitation. Archie and Benny exchanged glances before breathing sighs of relief. Phew! And here we thought Daddy knew about our secret. That's because you treat Mommy and Essie really well, Benny said in the sweetest voice possible. Lucian glared at the two of them in an attempt to determine if they were telling the truth. Unfortunately for him, he didn't know them all that well, so he couldn't tell if they were lying or not. After staring intensely at them for a few minutes, Lucian retracted his gaze skeptically and stood up straight. "It's getting late. I'll take care of your mommy, so you two can go to bed now." The kids nodded obediently and left the room, feeling incredibly relieved that they were able to avoid further questioning. Since Lucian hardly showed any emotion, they couldn't help but wonder how he would react after learning the truth behind their identities. Lucian waited until the kids were gone before turning to look at Roxanne, who was fast asleep. "Even the kids can tell that I'm treating you well. What about you? How do you feel about me?" he asked while letting out a helpless sigh. Of course, she didn't respond since she was out cold. Lucian then sat down on her chair on the balcony and started working on his phone. After what seemed like forever, he heard a noise coming from the room. Lucian quickly put his phone down and went to check on Roxanne. For some reason, she had a deep frown on her face and seemed to be mumbling something in her sleep. As Lucian leaned in close, he heard her saying, "Why do you keep ignoring me, Lucian? Am I not good enough for you?" Lucian tensed up as he recalled her doing something similar when they went on vacation. "I still remember how she got drunk and began mumbling about stuff that happened 6 years ago. Why does she keep saying this?" After giving it some thought, Lucian found the answer to his question. "Roxanne fell head over heels for me 6 years ago, but I was so caught up with repaying the Pearson family's kindness that I ignored her completely. I bet she went through the exact same pain that I'm experiencing now. Well, I suppose it makes sense that she doesn't see how well I'm treating her right now." With an apologetic look in his eyes, Lucian held her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. He was about to say something when Roxanne furrowed her brows all of a sudden. The next thing he knew, she woke up and struggled to cover her mouth with her hand, but it was too late. She then bent over the side of the bed and began vomiting. As Roxanne instinctively tightened her grip on Lucian's hand, he wasn't able to back away in time and got covered in vomit. "Slip out of the room." At the sight of Roxanne's pale expression, Lucian leaned in to look into her eyes with a frown. "How is it? Do you feel any better?" In her condition, Roxanne couldn't hear him at all. After vomiting, she collapsed onto her bed and mumbled, "Ugh, it feels terrible." Lucian's heart ached for her when he heard that. After getting up to take off the shirt that she had puked on, he went out to wash his hands and poured her a cup of water for her to gargle with. When he returned to the room, he saw Roxanne standing on her feet. She was taking off her clothes as if there was no one around. While doing so, she continued to mumble, I want to shower. The sight of her stripping jolted Lucian back to his senses. He hurried to her side to hold her back. Stop taking off your clothes. Annoyed, Roxanne threw him a look of displeasure and insisted, I want to shower. Move aside. While she was speaking, she began to unbuckle her bra. Lucian quickly looked away, stunned. By the time he turned back around, Roxanne had already stumbled her way to the bathroom door and her slender body greeted his eyes in all its glory. Stupefied by the scene, he could only gawk. Since I last saw her 6 years ago, her figure has grown even more alluring. The drunken Roxanne had even forgotten to close the bathroom door after entering. She turned on the shower and proceeded to bathe herself. From inside the bedroom, Lucian watched everything she was doing with dark eyes. Seeing that she was still behaving as if there was no one around, he closed the bathroom door with a sigh before cleaning up the mess in the room. By the time he was done, Roxanne was still inside. Knitting his brows at the puke she had left on his body, Lucian left the room to clean himself up. No sooner had he stepped out than Roxanne emerged from the bathroom. By then, the shower had helped her regain most of her senses. When she noticed that the sheets on her bed had been changed, she was still in a bit of a daze. Nevertheless, the irritation in her throat reminded her that she had just vomited. But why aren't there any signs of it in the room? Instead, the room looks very clean. In her groggy state, Lucian's face emerged in her mind. While I was drunk, I seemed to have heard his voice. Did he really help me? Holding that thought, Roxanne gave her head a forceful shake, hoping to dispel the thought from her head. No way. There's no way he would have taken care of me like that, and he changed my sheets. I can't even imagine him changing his own sheets. At that thought, Roxanne nipped that possibility in the bud. However, she still couldn't figure out who it was who had taken care of her. Finally, she gave up guessing. After having had a lot to drink, she could still feel her head spinning. Sleep was the only thing on her mind. As a strong sense of drowsiness struck her, Roxanne turned off the lights in the room and went to bed. When Lucian came out of the bathroom and saw that the lights in Roxanne's room had been turned off, he checked on her out of concern. Only when he saw her soundly asleep did he quietly slip out of the room. Fly into a rage before he left, Lucian went to the children's room to check on them. As soon as he opened the door, he saw them chatting while holding a laptop in their arms. At the sight of him, the boys closed the laptop and gave him a self-conscious look. Mr. Farwell, what brings you here? Is Mommy all right? Lucian was still wearing the shirt Roxanne had puked on as he had no change of clothes, but his jacket managed to hide the dirty shirt from view. Looking at their anxious expressions, Lucian asked with a frown, It's getting late. Why aren't you asleep? The boys exchanged glances. We'll go to sleep right away. There was no way they would tell him that their concern over whether their parents would argue was what keeping them awake. Regarding them inquisitively, Lucian said in a deep voice, Your mommy is already asleep. I'll be heading home now. You boys should go to bed soon. After that, he reminded them, Don't tell your mommy about what happened tonight. Despite agreeing to Lucian's request, the boys were filled with disappointment. They had initially hoped that Lucian would take care of their mother for the entire night, and when Roxanne saw him when she woke up, she would definitely be touched. Unfortunately, their father was about to leave, and he even forbade them from telling their mother about it. At the rate they're going, when will Daddy and Mommy ever reconcile? Only after making sure the children were asleep did Lucian leave. By the time he returned to the Farwell residence, Estella was already in dreamland. After changing his clothes, Lucian went to check on her. Estella, who had been missing her father, did not sleep well and woke up the instant he entered her room. She rubbed her eyes and looked groggily in the direction of the door. Lucian walked up to her bed and gave her hair a gentle tousle. "Did I wake you up?" Estella shook her head, then wrinkled her nose as she sniffed the air. She looked up at her father with concern and asked, "Daddy, were you out drinking?" Lucian was stunned by her question. He lowered his head to smell himself and realized he was indeed reeking of alcohol. "My clothes were probably tainted by the smell inside the car." Estella maintained her curious look at him. Meeting her eyes, Lucian explained casually, "It belongs to Ms. Jarvis." His explanation jolted Estella awake. She tugged at Lucian's sleeve and asked anxiously, "Did Ms. Jarvis drink a lot?" "Daddy, why aren't you taking care of her at her place?" Lucian sighed inwardly in resignation, for he had almost forgotten how much Estella cared about Roxanne. "I came home after tucking Ms. Jarvis in. She's already asleep." Still, Estella wasn't satisfied with his answer. "But what if she doesn't feel well when she wakes up?" "Daddy, you should have waited until she wakes up tomorrow morning before coming home." Lucian simply chuckled and shook his head without commenting any further. "It's not like I don't want to, but if she sees me tomorrow morning, she'll remember that she stripped herself naked in front of me. When that happens, I'm afraid she will fly into a rage out of embarrassment. I might as well let her think that whatever happened was nothing but a dream." Faced with his silence, Estella began complaining about how bad he was at courting Roxanne. Soon, her rambling voice began drifting away, and her eyes could no longer stay open. Until she fell asleep, Lucian didn't explain a thing. "Cannot remember too." The next morning, Roxanne woke up feeling disorientated and was gripped by a splitting headache. The room reeked of alcohol. When memories of the night before gradually returned to her, she could only recall drinking a lot at the celebration party Jack had organized and Jack offering to send her home. However, that was where her memories ended. "Logically speaking, the room should be in a mess after I drank so much. But now, it looks spick and span instead. If it wasn't for the stench of alcohol, I wouldn't have believed that I was drunk last night." As Roxanne stepped out of bed in bafflement, she accidentally stepped on something. Lowering her head, she was greeted by the sight of her clothes strewn all over the floor. She furrowed her brows at the sight of them and felt as if she had forgotten something important. Despite racking her brain for a long time, she couldn't remember anything and felt her headache worsen instead. Finally, she gave up trying to recall the previous night's events and went to take a shower. Upon emerging from the bathroom, she heard a series of careful knocks on the door. She opened the door and was greeted by Archie and Benny, who looked extremely concerned. "Mommy, how are you feeling?" The children looked at her anxiously. Roxanne smiled and reassured them, "I'm fine. I just have a light headache." Then, struck by a sudden thought, she asked, "How did I come home last night?" After exchanging a quick glance, the boys responded in their piping voices, "Mr. Farwell brought you home." "Lucian?" A hint of surprise flashed across Roxanne's eyes. "I only remember Jack offering to send me home. How did Lucian end up doing so? When did he leave?" Roxanne probed further when she failed to recall the events after the effects of the alcohol took over. Remembering their father's instructions, the boys replied reluctantly, He left after sending you back to your room." Only then did Roxanne heave a sigh of relief. "Thank God! At the very least, he didn't see me at my worst. It's just that, did someone watch over me last night?" Roxanne remained unconvinced. The question ignited a sparkle in the boys' eyes. Thinking that their mother had remembered something, they gave her a wide-eye stare while waiting for her to guess. Contrary to their expectations, Roxanne scratched her nose and speculated, "Was it your Aunt Madeline who stayed back?" Archie's and Benny's eyes darkened. They shook their heads and begrudgingly took credit for it. "We gave you some water and something for the hangover. Are they saying no one took care of me last night?" Roxanne was just as puzzled as before. "The room is so clean. Did I clean it out of my subconscious obsession with cleanliness despite my drunken state?" She wondered if she was just imagining things because she couldn't help but notice the awkward expression on the children's faces. "Mommy, do you still remember how you met Mr. Farwell?" Desperately maintaining their cool, the boys changed the topic by getting the burning question off their chests. Throughout the night, they had been itching to know how Lucian had found Roxanne. However, Roxanne was just as clueless as they were. All she could manage was an awkward smile. I can't remember too." Roxanne was utterly embarrassed by the fact that she was unaware of how she was brought home despite being an adult. "I must check with Jack the next time I see him." Lucky for her, the boys didn't probe further. They expressed concern for her well-being instead. "How are you feeling?" Roxanne chatted with her sons as they descended the stairs together. In the middle of breakfast, they heard the sudden ring of the doorbell. The boys looked up, their eyes filled with anticipation. Thinking it was their father who had come to see their mother, they snuck a glance at the door. Roxanne, baffled by the boys' sudden delight, got up to open the door. "Roxanne!" Standing at the door was Madeline, who craned her neck to peek inside as if she was looking for someone when the door opened. Roxanne was about to check with Madeline about last night when the boys hurried over and looked up smilingly at their godmother. "Aunt Madeline, have you had breakfast? Do you want to join us?" Madeline had wanted to ask when Lucian left, but the boys interrupted her. She bent down to tousle their hair and declined with a smile, "I'll pass. I need to go to work. You boys enjoy yourself." She then turned her attention to her best friend. "How do you feel? Are you having a bad hangover? I saw you drinking a lot last night." Roxanne reassured her, "I'm fine, other than a minor headache. Anyway, it should be easily cured with a day's worth of rest." Hearing that, Madeline nodded with relief and did not ask any further question. Truth be told, she had to work an additional shift that day. With the hospital calling incessantly to pester her, she could only drop by briefly on her way to work. Upon learning that Roxanne was fine, she said a short goodbye before driving away. Once their godmother was out of sight, both the boys heaved a sigh of relief. That was close. Aunt Madeline almost let it slip. Even though Lucian's actions didn't make sense to them, the boys believed that their father must have had his reasons. After all, Lucian knew they were on his side and wouldn't have gotten them to keep the secret unless he deemed it necessary. With Madeline's car gone, the increasingly curious Roxanne lowered her gaze at the boys. If I'm not mistaken, Madeline seemed to be looking for someone. However, the kids noticed it before she said anything. That's why they were so anxious to change the topic. I'm sure they must be hiding something from me. Knowing that she might not get to the truth even if she asked, Roxanne decided not to pursue the matter. After they were done with breakfast, she sent them to the kindergarten. Upon their arrival, they saw Estella holding Lucian's hand at the entrance. The sight of Lucian triggered a strange feeling within Roxanne. She wondered if it was just her imagination, but she vaguely remembered hearing his voice the night before. "Ms. Jarvis." Estella's piping voice jolted her back to her senses, and she looked down at the former with a smile. Estella raised her head and looked at Roxanne with concern. "Ms. Jarvis, how are you feeling?" Roxanne was thrown into confusion by how abrupt the question was. "Daddy said that you had a lot to drink last night," Estella said innocently. Roxanne looked at Lucian hesitatingly, briefly stunned. Lucian had on a calm look. "She caught the smell of alcohol on me, so I told her about it." Not expecting Lucian to explain himself to her, Roxanne was taken aback for a few seconds. Then she turned to Estella and replied softly, "Thank you for your concern, Essie. I'm feeling a lot better now." Relieved, Estella responded with an obedient nod. After watching the children enter the kindergarten, Roxanne turned to Lucian with mixed emotions and started, "The boys told me that it was you who sent me home last night." Lucian nodded noncommittally. He averted his gaze from her and looked to the side as if nothing had happened. In truth, he couldn't help recalling the scene from the night before at the sight of her face. Roxanne trailed his gaze, only to see his car that was parked by the roadside. Thinking that he was in a hurry to leave, she decided to get straight to the point. "Can you tell me how we ran into each other last night?" Lucian's face turned cold when Roxanne mentioned their encounter. "We happened to run into each other in the hotel elevator." Even though he didn't describe how he had wrestled her away from Jack's arms, Roxanne had no trouble imagining it. Given his temper, he must have been infuriated to see me together with Jack. It goes without saying that something unpleasant must have happened between them. Nonetheless, what surprised her this time was that Lucian didn't probe further about her relationship with Jack. When the thought struck her, a peculiar feeling arose from within, causing her to recall their conversation the day before. "Lucian must be trying to stop me from going to the contract signing ceremony because he and Jack are competitors. And that must be the reason he showed up at the hotel. It was just that he had arrived too late. Is the conclusion of the matter the reason he no longer cares about my relationship with Jack?" Holding that thought, Roxanne felt slighted for some reason. Nevertheless, she kept her emotions to herself and expressed her gratitude flatly instead. "Thank you for sending me home, Mr. Farwell." Lucian nodded with a frown. Just thinking about the image of her and Jack together angered him. However, when he saw her face, he couldn't help but be reminded of the scene from the night before. Overwhelmed by the clash of opposing emotions, Lucian couldn't bring himself to question her any further. All of a sudden, an inexplicable tension emerged between the two of them. Upon collecting her thoughts, Roxanne gave him a distant smile. "If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way, then." With that, she walked past Lucian without giving him a chance to react. Lucian's eyes darkened, but he didn't stop her. It wasn't until her footsteps could barely be heard that he finally returned to his car. On the way to the research institute, Roxanne felt unsettled as her mind kept dwelling upon her conversation with Lucian and his attitude toward her. In the past, he would have stopped me and said something if I were to leave just like that. But this time, he didn't. As for his attitude toward me and Jack, he doesn't look like he cares anymore. In fact, he didn't even bother questioning me any further. Also, while I spoke to him, he seemed to be in a hurry to leave as if he was trying to avoid me. Roxanne felt the irony when she recalled Lucian's declaration that he wanted to pursue her. After all, she had been stuck in a dilemma for a long time and had even considered if she should accept him. However, she now realized that she had been a fool to have taken him seriously. In fact, she couldn't help but laugh at herself for wondering whether Lucian had stayed back to take care of her the night before. From the looks of his attitude earlier, how is it possible that he bothered to show me any concern? The moment she arrived at the research institute, she received a call from Jack. She schooled her emotions and answered her phone. "Mr. Damaris, what can I do for you?" Roxanne's voice reminded him of the incident last night. "Nothing really. I just want to seek your opinion on something. Heartbreak Group hopes you can take on the role of technical advisor for them. I think you're up for it, but what are your thoughts?" Roxanne was stunned by the proposal. It took her a few seconds to agree with a smile. "Since it's something you and Heartbreak Group want, I naturally won't say no." Jack chuckled. "I'm glad to hear that." After discussing some details, both of them ended the call. When Roxanne put her phone aside, an avalanche of emotions descended upon her again. According to Jack, my assistance is crucial to the collaboration between Damaris Group and Heartbreak Group. Now that I have agreed to take on the role of technical advisor, Lucian would probably be angry with me again when he found out about it. Realizing what was going through her mind, Roxanne put an end to such thoughts and laughed self-deprecatingly at herself. The matter has been settled, and the competition between Lucian and Jack has ended. Why would he continue to be involved with me? Meanwhile, Lucian didn't return to Farwell Group. Instead, he drove straight to Queen Group to see Jonathan, intending to discuss the matter related to Heartbreak Group with him. Jonathan stood up and greeted Lucian with a nod when he saw him making his entrance. "I heard that Heartbreak Group has signed the contract with Damaris Group last night. Our plan to take over Heartbreak Group has failed." Lucian took a seat opposite him, looking solemn. "Other than Heartbreak Group, do you have your eye on any other pharmaceutical companies?" Since Jonathan's expertise was in the medical industry, Lucian would usually seek out the former's opinion on such matters. After pondering upon the question, Jonathan gave a helpless shrug. "In Horrington, there's no other company I can think of other than Heartbreak Group. That's the only company that will bring us the biggest benefit with a takeover." As soon as he said that, both their expressions turned grim. Jonathan's conclusion was that they had no other choice other than Heartbreak Group. However, now that the company had signed a contract with Damaris Group, negotiating a takeover had become significantly more difficult. If we fail to acquire Heartbreak Group, our project will be put in a disadvantageous position, Jonathan said matter-of-factly. Lucian nodded in understanding, then began to think of other ways. They had spent a lot of time negotiating the contract clauses with Heartbreak Group before obtaining the latter's agreement. Yet, Damaris Group swooping in suddenly had caused Heartbreak Group to renege on the contract. Now that Heartbreak Group and Damaris Group had established a partnership that was well publicized, the chances of acquiring the former were as good as none. All of a sudden, Jonathan suggested, how about I get another company to negotiate a partnership with Damaris Group? We can learn about the price Heartbreak Group asked for. Then, if we lower our asking price, we may be able to induce Damaris Group into breaking the contract with Heartbreak Group, which will create an opening for us to continue negotiating the takeover. In fact, we may even be able to do so at a lower price. In the event Heartbreak Group was abandoned by Damaris Group, they could use it as a talking point. Moreover, it was Heartbreak Group that had reneged on the contract first. They were naturally in their debt for doing so. If takeover talks were to be revived, Heartbreak Group would definitely feel pressured to give in. Jonathan beamed with pride over his idea that was capable of killing two birds with one stone when he finished. The one bothering him. Lucian, however, furrowed his brows tightly upon listening to his best friend's words. Faced with Lucian's lack of response, Jonathan urged anxiously, "Our project is about to get up to speed, and Heartbreak Group is an extremely important piece. If we can't acquire them, we'll have no choice but to back out and wait for the next opportunity." That was Jonathan's attempt at questioning Lucian. It was one thing for Queen Group to give up, but Farwell Group had never backed out of anything before. Given their status in Horrington, Farwell Group had always gotten their way regardless of the situation. Plenty of companies clamored to collaborate with them. Unexpectedly, with a brazenness that came out of nowhere, not only did Heartbreak Group dare to bargain with Farwell Group, but they even cancelled the contract at the very last stage. If it was any other company, Lucian would have already taught them a painful lesson. However, Lucian didn't react at all this time. He seemed to have prepared to accept the loss without any retribution. Jonathan was frustrated by that thought. "Lucian, what's on your mind? Why don't you put Heartbreak Group in their place? What is it that has been worrying you for so long?" "I heard." Before Jonathan could finish, Lucian interrupted, "To have been chosen as the heir of the Damaris family, Jack is certainly no fool. If even you can tell that Heartbreak Group is the best candidate, why would he give it up over some short-term profit?" Jonathan thought there was something not right about Lucian's words. What does he mean by even I can tell? Does he think that I'm inferior to Jack? The thought filled Jonathan with rage. So what if he can tell? When it comes down to it, Queen Group is still the largest pharmaceutical company in Horrington. If we hadn't gotten involved in this project, Queen Group would have already secured the contract to supply the medication. If Jack really wasn't a fool, he would have worked with Queen Group instead. Reading between the lines, Lucian knew that his friend was throwing a tantrum. Despite that, he proceeded to expose him mercilessly. It's precisely because Jack is smart that he has chosen not to work with Queen Group. Based on Queen Group's influence, it wouldn't be a surprise if they wanted a lion's share of the profits, making any negotiations with Damaris Group difficult. On the contrary, Herbscape Group would be desperate to work with them and willing to make significant concessions just to secure the partnership. Jonathan gradually calmed down. He sighed in exasperation when he thought about the stupid comment he had just made. It's true that I had my eye on Herbscape Group for the same reason. Furthermore, they have one major advantage over Queen Group. His words elicited a baffled look from Lucian. In a steady tone, Jonathan said, Herbscape Group is not only involved in traditional medicine but is also skilled in many techniques of modern medicine. Compared to them, Queen Group is focused solely on traditional medicine, and that must be the reason why Damaris Group has chosen to work with them. However, the only mystery left was what Damaris Group had offered Herbscape Group to induce them into reneging on the contract with Farwell Group. Despite having done his own research on Herbscape Group, Lucian wasn't aware of the actual reason Jonathan had chosen the company. Therefore, when the importance of acquiring Herbscape Group dawned upon him, Lucian couldn't help but furrow his brows. Now that the collaboration between Herbscape Group and Damaris Group has been settled, we should take more time to discuss our plans for the acquisition. Evidently, a solution was out of reach in the short term. Furthermore, that issue wasn't the one that was bothering him the most. After giving Lucian an indifferent nod, Jonathan looked at his friend in a thoughtful manner. I heard that Dr. Jarvis has not only participated in the collaboration between Damaris Group and Herbscape Group, but the latter has also offered her the role of technical advisor. I wonder what her thoughts about the matter are. That was the first time Lucian had heard about it. His heart clenched, and his already gloomy expression darkened further. I don't know. He had thought that Roxanne would be more cautious after he had revealed to her how Jack had snatched Herbscape Group away from him the day before. Yet little did he expect Herbscape Group to directly approach Roxanne to be their technical advisor. As the possibility of her agreeing to it crossed his mind, Lucian couldn't help but feel incensed. Jonathan was surprised by the drastic change in Lucian's expression. Lucian, have you not succeeded in your pursuit of Dr. Jarvis? When Lucian simply shot him a glance without denying it, Jonathan couldn't help feeling what a shame it was. With how eligible he is, he could have had any woman he wanted. Instead, not only he insisted on keeping his eye on Roxanne, but he also failed in his pursuit despite all the effort he expended. Jonathan cleared his throat, suppressed the surprise within him, and commented with a smile, "Well, you were at fault 6 years ago. It only makes sense for Dr. Jarvis to resent you for it." The mere mention of the past made Lucian scowl. The 2 times Roxanne had gotten drunk had shown him how much hurt he had inflicted upon her 6 years ago. He no longer felt the right to complain about her resentment toward him and the distance she had placed between them. All he wanted to do now was to make amends. Having innocently assumed that Lucian had made progress in his pursuit, Jonathan had simply wanted to tease his friend. But to his surprise, he ended up rubbing salt in Lucian's wound. In response to Lucian's reaction, Jonathan scratched his nose awkwardly. "Don't worry about it. Even if you have made a mistake, there's always a chance to redeem yourself. As long as you seize the opportunity, Dr. Jarvis will surely forgive you." "How do I redeem myself?" Jonathan was stunned. He didn't expect Lucian to take his casual remark seriously. How do you redeem yourself? How would I know what happened between the two of you? Since he had inadvertently brought up the difficult topic, Jonathan had no choice but to force himself to come up with a solution. Since you hurt Dr. Jarvis 6 years ago and want her to forgive you for it, you obviously need to let her feel that you love her. But I already did as you said. Lucian had been given her flowers and confessing his feelings for her. On top of that, he even had the 3 children help him behind the scenes. Yet, Roxanne refused to believe in his feelings for her. In fact, when they had gone their separate ways in the morning, he could feel that their relationship seemed to have deteriorated. The worst part was Lucian didn't even know what the problem was. Jonathan almost choked on himself. When it comes to pursuing women, I am still superior to this hard-hearted friend of mine despite my lack of experience. Also, I have the advantage of having a sister. All this while, Frida has always been very popular and has plenty of suitors. With that thought in mind, Jonathan began to rack his brains to recall what those men had done while courting his sister. Do not let it bother you. After giving it much thought, Jonathan came to a brazen conclusion. What you have done so far isn't enough. Lucian cocked a brow. I only followed what you said. Jonathan was rendered speechless by the snarky response. He was filled with the urge to remind Lucian who it was who needed help. However, when he recalled that Lucian's demeanor would inherently make him bad at courtship, he decided to shoulder the blame. That's because the methods I shared with you weren't enough, he said in resignation. What else can I do? Lucian looked at him in puzzlement. Roxanne's attitude in the morning made him feel uneasy. He wanted to improve the dynamics of their relationship as soon as possible. Scratching his nose, Jonathan suggested, you know, women like romantic stuff. You can consider doing something romantic that will move her. Something romantic? Lucian thought back to the recent interactions he had with Roxanne. Come to think of it, I don't remember doing anything romantic. I might have, but I certainly wasn't aware of it. For example, while out shopping, you can surprise her with a gift when she's not looking. Or, you can even organize a romantic dinner with her. Knowing that Lucian had no inkling of how to be romantic, Jonathan solemnly quoted a few examples. However, Lucian glowered at his suggestions. I'm not doing that. There's no way I can bring myself to do something like that. Besides, Roxanne would probably see through me and end up doubting my sincerity instead. His reaction filled Jonathan with exasperation. Whatever it is, the point is to be romantic. If those 2 methods don't suit you, you can always try something else. If you continue to sit on your hands, there's no way Dr. Jarvis is ever going to forgive you. You should sleep on it. He tried his very best to come up with suggestions, but all of them were shot down by Lucian. At the rate the latter was going, he would soon run out of ideas. Upon hearing his friend's words, Lucian pinched the space between his brows. Since I'm the one who wants to make it up to her, I should come up with my own ideas. Nonetheless, Lucian still couldn't figure out what sort of gestures were considered romantic. Suppressing the anger within him, Jonathan advised, at this point, you should just drop your airs in front of her. I have seen how badly she has treated you before, but it could have been worse. If you don't do anything about it, both of you will stay this way forever." He patted Lucian on his back and added, "This isn't more difficult than doing business, and you have nothing to lose. If you really want Dr. Jarvis to forgive you, you have to give it a try no matter what." A peculiar sensation swelled within Lucian, and he eventually nodded in acknowledgement. "Okay. I'll do it." Hearing that, Jonathan heaved a sigh of relief and sought to make up for his earlier mistake. Even if Dr. Jarvis agrees to take on the role of technical advisor, that's still just her job. Don't let it bother you. Lucian knitted his brows and nodded as he recalled their conversation earlier. Only then did a smile spread across Jonathan's face, and they continued discussing the matter related to Herbscape Group. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.